The words hang in the air like shards of ice, sharp and cutting. I can feel them lodge somewhere beneath my ribs, making it hard to breathe. He's standing by the window, framed by the weak afternoon light, his back to me.
It's a Tuesday.
Or maybe a Wednesday. It doesn't matter. The days blur together into one long, gray stretch of just getting through it. No one respects you, he says. It's not a question. It's a statement. A simple, factual observation, delivered in that flat, almost bored tone he reserves for things he considers beneath his notice. Like my feelings. Like me. I feel my face go numb. My hands, resting on the cool kitchen counter, start to tremble. He doesn't turn around. He doesn't need to see the effect of his words. He knows. He always knows exactly where to aim. No one respects you. The words echo in the sudden silence. The refrigerator hums. A car drives by outside. Life continues, oblivious to the small, quiet implosion happening right here, in the unremarkable space between us. He finally turns, and there's a flicker of something in his eyes that isn't boredom. It's contempt. It's the confirmation that he believes it, too. And maybe he's right. Maybe I don't respect myself enough to walk away from a moment like this. If you've ever felt like someone saw right through you, like your worth was invisible, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know to share these stories. Before the words became weapons, before the silence became a battlefield, there was just us. Or what I thought was us. Our apartment was small, smelling faintly of old coffee and the cheap air freshener I used to try and mask the reality of a life that felt increasingly stale. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We had built it piece by piece, or so I believed. A rickety bookshelf from a yard sale, a sofa I'd painstakingly reupholstered, mismatched mugs holding the promise of shared mornings. My job wasn't glamorous. I worked in accounting, the kind of place where the only excitement was the annual tax audit. Numbers, spreadsheets, the quiet hum of computers. It suited me, I thought. I liked the order, the certainty. In a world that felt increasingly chaotic, numbers always added up. There was a logic to them, a clear path, from start to finish. It was a stark contrast to the messy, illogical nature of my life outside those office walls. He worked in sales. Dynamic, charming, always on the phone, closing deals. Or talking about closing deals. His life seemed to move at a different pace than mine, faster, louder, more vibrant. I was the anchor, steady and quiet, while he was the sail, catching every gust of wind. We complemented each other, people said. The calm to his storm. The quiet strength behind his ambition. I liked that. I liked feeling necessary, like my presence provided a foundation for his soaring. His family lived in the next town over. A sprawling, slightly too large house that always felt a little cold, despite the fire crackling in the hearth on holidays. His parents were traditional. His father, a retired engineer, was stoic and measured. His mother, impeccably dressed, presided over family dinners with a quiet authority. There were siblings, spouses, cousins, a large, boisterous clan. I was the quiet one at family gatherings, the one who helped clear the dishes, who listened more than she spoke. They were polite, cordial. They accepted me into the fold, as you do when your son marries someone. But I always felt observed, assessed. Like I was a pleasant addition, but not quite essential. His mother would ask about my job, but her eyes would glaze over when I talked about balance sheets. His father would nod along to his son's boasts about work, occasionally offering a wry comment, but rarely engaged with me beyond small talk about the weather. I didn't mind, not really. I told myself it was just their way. They were busy, successful people. I was just me. Quiet. In accounting, I didn't have grand stories of closing deals or navigating corporate politics. My world felt smaller, contained. He never seemed to notice this dynamic, or perhaps he did, and it didn't bother him. Or perhaps, even then, he shared the subtle sentiment that my world wasn't quite as important as his. He'd talk over me sometimes at dinner, or interrupt to tell a story of his own that was louder, funnier, more captivating. I'd smile, nod, let him have the stage. It was easier. It was the path of least resistance in a relationship where I was slowly learning that resistance often led to his withdrawal, his silence, his subtle ways of making me feel like I was less. We had dreams, I suppose. Or rather, he had dreams he told me about, and I nodded along, making them mine too. A bigger house, travel, maybe kids someday. Financial security was a constant topic. He worried about money, about appearances. He wanted to provide, to be seen as successful. I handled the bills, the budgeting. My quiet competence with numbers balanced his grand ambitions and occasional impulsiveness. I was the silent engine powering the visible machine of our life. Our finances were separate, mostly. We had a joint account for shared expenses, rent, utilities, groceries. But our salaries went into individual accounts, and we transferred funds to the joint one. It was a system we'd started early on before marriage and just never changed. It felt practical, independent. Little did I know, it would become the foundation for my quiet rebellion. His parents had a mortgage, a big one. I knew this because it came up sometimes, not in a complaining way, but in discussions about their plans, their retirement. It was just a fact of their life, a large number on a balance sheet I never saw but could imagine. His family wasn't struggling, not exactly, but the mortgage was a weight they carried. It limited their ability to travel as much as they wanted, to do renovations, to fully relax into retirement. It was their biggest liability. And maybe in the back of my mind, years before the insult, I had already started seeing it as a problem that needed solving. A large, imposing number that needed to be brought to zero. It was the accountant in me, I guess. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Looking back, the signs were there, subtle at first, then growing bolder. His jokes about my boring job. His easy dismissal of my opinions on anything outside of household matters or basic budgeting. The way he'd sometimes introduce me not by my name, but as my wife. She's the quiet one. It chipped away at me, piece by piece. Like water on stone. Slow, relentless, and ultimately, deeply corrosive. But the words, "No one respects you," those weren't chips. They were an explosion. A demolition charge placed right at the foundation of my self-worth. Why did he say it? It wasn't a big fight. Not like the ones you see in movies, with shouting and piatti flying. It was smaller, colder. We were talking about something mundane. I don't even remember what. Maybe it was about money. Maybe I had suggested we couldn't afford something he wanted. Maybe I had questioned a spending decision. Something small, something that pricked his balloon of self-importance. And in that instant, he wanted to deflate mine completely. He said it casually, turning away, as if stating the obvious truth. "Oh, come on. Be realistic. No one respects you when you talk like that." Or maybe it was just, "No one respects you, full stop." The exact phrasing is hazy now, lost in the red haze that flooded my vision. But the words themselves are etched into my memory, perfectly preserved in the amber of that agonizing moment. The air thickened. It became heavy, hard to breathe. I felt my entire body tense, bracing for impact. But the impact was internal. A sickening lurch. My mind scrambled, trying to process the sheer cruelty, the casual brutality of it. No one respects you. Not even him? Is that what he was saying? Is that what he believed? My first reaction was disbelief. Then hurt. Raw, searing hurt. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand to know what gave him the right to say something so profoundly damaging. To whom was he referring? His family? My colleagues? Him? Was he saying he didn't respect me? I stood there, rooted to the spot, my heart hammering against my ribs. He didn't look at me. He just stood there, staring out the window, as if the conversation was already over, as if my reaction wasn't even worth witnessing. That was often his power play, the withdrawal, the emotional stonewalling that made me feel like I was arguing with a brick wall. But this time, the words were too sharp. They pierced through the fog of our routine. They landed and they stuck. And something inside me, something that had been dormant for too long, began to stir. Instead of crying, instead of begging him to take it back, instead of asking what I could do to earn respect, a cold calm began to settle over me. It started in my extremities, a tingling numbness, and spread inwards, coating my heart in ice. No one respects you. Okay. If that was the reality he saw, the reality he lived in, then maybe it was time to create a different reality. A reality where those words were demonstrably, undeniably false. I didn't say anything back. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my jaw clenched. I just nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. He still didn't look at me. After a moment, he sighed, a sound of impatience, as if my silence was an inconvenience, and walked out of the room. The sound of the door closing echoed in the quiet apartment. I was alone with the words. No one respects you. I walked over to the window, the one he had just been standing by, and looked out. The street below was unremarkable. People walking dogs, cars driving by, the mundane rhythm of everyday life. It all felt so distant. I stayed there for a long time, the cold seeping into my bones. I replayed the moment in my head, searching for a different meaning, a different interpretation. Maybe he didn't mean it? Maybe it was just said in anger? But there was no anger in his tone. Just that flat, dismissive observation. He meant it. He believed it. And perhaps, worst of all, he wanted me to believe it too. That night, I couldn't sleep. His breathing was steady beside me, oblivious. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words looping in my mind. No one respects you. I thought about my life. Had I become someone who wasn't respected? Had I allowed myself to shrink so small that I was invisible? Had I poured so much energy into supporting his life that I had forgotten to build my own? I thought about his family. They were kind, yes, in their way. But did they respect me? Did they see me as an equal to their son, to his successful siblings, to their accomplished spouses? I remembered small moments, glances exchanged, conversations that flowed around me rather than including me. Maybe he was right. Maybe in their eyes I was just the wife. Pleasant, quiet, useful for helping in the kitchen, but not someone whose opinions held weight, whose achievements were noteworthy. A slow burn started in my gut. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was anger, a cold, hard anger that felt strangely empowering. If no one respects me, maybe it's because I haven't given them a reason to. Maybe I've been too quiet, too accommodating, too focused on being what other people wanted me to be. The next morning was a blur. We didn't talk about it. He acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed me goodbye, went to work. I went to my accounting job. I sat at my desk, the numbers on the screen blurring. I couldn't focus. My head was pounding. The words were still there, a relentless drumbeat in my skull. No one respects you. I looked around the office. Did my colleagues respect me? We were cordial. We worked together.
We met deadlines.
But were we friends? Did they see me as more than the person who processed their expense reports? I felt a pang of loneliness. My world felt incredibly small, defined by these two spaces, the quiet apartment and the quiet office. That day was the start of something different. I didn't know it at the time, not consciously. But the shift had begun. The foundation had been cracked, and now I had to decide whether to let it crumble or rebuild it, stronger this time. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. I listened to how he talked to me, how he talked about me. I watched the interactions at family dinners. I saw the subtle dismissals, the polite condescension. It was everywhere once I started looking. It was like putting on glasses for the first time and realizing the world wasn't blurry at all. I just hadn't been seeing it clearly. He continued as before, perhaps even more emboldened. His comments became sharper, his tone more openly dismissive. If I expressed an opinion, he'd counter it immediately, sometimes with a sigh, as if my thoughts were tiresome. If I talked about something I did at work, he'd nod vaguely, then launch into a story about his latest deal. It was a constant, low-level erosion of my presence. I tried, initially, to change, to be louder, to assert myself. I tried to join his conversations with more confidence. I tried to share my own successes, however small they felt in comparison to his. It was exhausting, like swimming against a strong current. He would either shut me down or ignore it, diverting the conversation back to himself. His family would sometimes give me polite, strained smiles, as if my attempts at being seen were slightly out of place. The insult had stripped away the illusion that our marriage was a partnership of equals. It wasn't. It was a structure built around him, and I was a supporting character, expected to play my part and stay in the background. And the worst part? He believed this was the natural order of things. He truly believed I wasn't someone who commanded respect. Money became a point of quiet tension, though we never fought about it openly. He wanted things, expensive things, to project an image of success. I was the one who had to figure out how to afford them within our means. My careful budgeting felt like a constant negotiation against his impulsive desires. He earned more than me, significantly more, and he never let me forget it, not with words, but with the way he dismissed my financial contributions as less significant. My money, he'd say, when referring to his earnings. Our money was only for the joint account, the bare necessities. The debt felt heavier. Credit card balances crept up. Savings stagnated. I felt the familiar anxiety of numbers not adding up, of the careful balance I tried to maintain tipping precariously. It felt like I was the only one holding the reins, trying to steer us away from a cliff edge while he was busy admiring the view. Meanwhile, his family's mortgage remained a silent backdrop. Occasionally, his parents would mention their plans for retirement, always prefacing it with a sigh about the house. It wasn't a complaint, just a statement of fact. That large mortgage payment limited their flexibility. I'd listen, nod, my accountant brain quietly tallying the numbers. How much was left? What was the interest rate? Could they afford it comfortably? It was an old habit, analyzing financial situations, a puzzle I enjoyed solving even if it wasn't my own. The stress of our own financial situation, coupled with the constant feeling of being disrespected, started to wear me down. I was quieter than ever at home. My smile felt pasted on. My energy dwindled. I felt like I was shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller, just as he seemed to expect. There was a moment, a few months after the insult, that felt particularly low. We were at a family dinner at his parents' house. His brother had just gotten a promotion. His sister was talking about a successful project at her kids' school. Everyone had something to share, something that showed their value, their contribution to the world. When his mother politely asked me how I was, I mumbled something about work being busy. He immediately jumped in, laughing, busy counting paper clips, I think. The laughter around the table felt like a physical blow. It wasn't malicious, not from everyone, but it landed exactly where he intended it to. A casual, public dismissal. A reinforcement of the idea that my work, my life, was trivial. I felt my cheeks burn. I forced a smile, but inside, I was crumbling. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor. That night, driving home, I didn't say anything. Neither did he. The silence in the car was thick with unspoken things. I looked out the window at the passing streetlights, each one a small, lonely of light in the darkness. I felt utterly alone. And for the first time, the anger wasn't just a slow burn. It was a fierce, consuming fire. He thinks I'm small. He thinks I'm invisible. He thinks I'm not worthy of respect. He thinks his life, his work, his family status is the only thing that matters. He thinks I'm stuck in his shadow. But he doesn't see everything. He doesn't see the hours I spend poring over spreadsheets, not just at work, but at home. He doesn't see the meticulous planning, the careful tracking, the quiet discipline. He doesn't see that while he's focused on the grand performance, I'm the one who understands the intricate details of the numbers, the true power they hold. The idea started small, a flicker of defiance in the darkness. What if? What if I wasn't just counting paper clips? What if I was building something he couldn't see, couldn't control? My own finances had always been separate, and I had always been frugal. Not in a restrictive way, but in a mindful one. I saved instinctively. I invested quietly, researching options, making careful decisions. It was part of my nature, the the same part that found comfort in balanced ledgers. Over the years, without ever making a fuss about it, I had built up a significant amount of savings. It wasn't enough to retire, but it was substantial. He had no idea. He knew I saved, of course, but he assumed it was small amounts, nothing compared to his earnings or his spending. He saw my financial discipline as a sign of my smallness, my lack of ambition. He called it hoarding pennies. The idea grew, fueled by the relentless sting of his words, the quiet pain of his family's polite indifference, and the low hum of my own accumulating power. The mortgage. His parents' mortgage. It was their burden, their largest liability. What if I could erase it? At first, it felt like a crazy idea. Impossible. Why would I? They weren't my parents. They were polite, but they weren't close. And he definitely didn't deserve to be connected to something like that. But the anger had twisted something inside me. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about him. It was about proving him wrong in the most undeniable way possible. It was about taking the thing he seemed to value most, his family's approval, his connection to their status, the idea of financial power, and demonstrating that I held a power he couldn't even comprehend. It was about respect. Not seeking it from him or even his family, but commanding it through an action so significant, so unexpected, that it would shatter his perception of me entirely. The plan started forming in my mind. It was intricate, like balancing a complex set of books. I needed to be sure. Sure of the amount. Sure of the process. And sure that I could do it without him ever finding out until the exact right moment. I started researching. Online discreetly. Looking up mortgage payoff processes. Bank procedures. I needed the specific details of his parents' mortgage. That was the tricky part. I couldn't ask them directly. I couldn't ask him. I had to be careful. He was careless with my feelings, but he wasn't stupid. He was observant in his own way, especially about anything involving money or things that impacted his life. I accessed our joint bank statements, looking for any clues, any account numbers, or bank names associated with his parents' mortgage payments if they had ever handled anything for them. There was nothing obvious. Then I remembered. Years ago, when his parents were refinancing, his mother had briefly mentioned the bank they were using. It was a regional bank, not a national one. A small detail, but it was a thread. I started there. It required patience. Phone calls where I pretended to be a relative gathering information. Online searches using public records, which were surprisingly limited, thankfully. It took weeks, maybe months of quiet, focused effort. Each small piece of information felt like a victory. The bank name, the approximate loan amount, the year they took it out. It was like piecing together a financial puzzle in the shadows. I had to be meticulous. Deleting browser history. Making sure my phone wasn't connected to our shared home network when I made calls. Keeping physical notes hidden. It felt like a spy operation, and in a way it was. I was operating behind enemy lines, the enemy being the dismissive, arrogant world he inhabited, where I was just a footnote. The deepened crisis wasn't an event, but a feeling, a pervasive, suffocating weight. The marriage felt hollow. Our conversations were superficial, circling around his needs, his day, his opinions. My own life felt increasingly irrelevant within the confines of our shared space. I spent more and more time in my own head, building the secret world of my plan. The contrast between the crushing weight of my current reality and the exhilarating, terrifying prospect of my secret operation became sharper. He was oblivious. That was the most galling part. He was so consumed by his own importance, his own struggles, real or perceived, that he didn't see the storm gathering right beside him. He continued with the casual cruelty, the subtle put-downs. Each one, instead of hurting me as deeply as it used to, added another brick to the wall I was building around my plan. It fueled the fire. It solidified my resolve. There was a specific argument, not long before I finalized the details of the payoff. It wasn't about money directly, but about a decision regarding our apartment. I wanted to do something small, a minor renovation to make it feel more like ours. He dismissed it instantly, saying it wasn't worth investing in this place, that we needed to save for a real, House someday, his idea of a real house. I pushed back, gently at first, explaining that it would improve our quality of life now. His response was sharp, laced with that familiar contempt. You just don't understand these things, he said. You think about pennies. I think about the big picture. It's the difference between someone who saves and someone who builds wealth. You're just small scale. Small scale. The words hit me. They echoed, no one respects you. It was the same theme. My perceived inadequacy, my perceived lack of understanding or ambition. But this time, the words didn't shatter me. They solidified me. He thinks he understands wealth. He thinks he understands the big picture. He thinks I'm small scale because I focus on details, on careful management. He doesn't know what wealth I've quietly built, brick by careful brick, number by number. He doesn't know the scale of the picture I'm currently painting in secret. That argument was the midpoint shift. It wasn't just about proving him wrong anymore. It was about redefining what big picture meant. It wasn't about boasting or projecting an image of wealth. It was about quiet power, about security, about the ability to fundamentally change someone's reality with a single, calculated action. He thought he was the one with the grand vision, the one who understood the mechanics of success. He had no idea. The turning point was quiet. It was a Tuesday evening, much like the one when he delivered the insult. I was sitting at my small desk in the corner of the living room, the faint glow of the computer screen illuminating my face. I had all the information now. The bank name, the account number, the exact payoff amount down to the last cent. My own savings, accumulated over years of diligent, quiet work, were more than enough. I stared at the numbers on the screen. This was it. The moment of decision. I could walk away, leave him, take my savings, start fresh. That would be an ending. A quiet exit. Or I could do this. I could use the very thing he dismissed, my careful, quiet accumulation of resources, to perform an act so large, so unexpected, that it would redefine everything. It wouldn't just be an exit. It would be a statement. A dismantling of his carefully constructed world. The anger was still there, but it was cooler now, sharper. It wasn't impulsive rage. It was strategic resolve. I wasn't doing this for him, or even truly for his family, not in the way of seeking gratitude or approval from him. I was doing it for myself. To reclaim my narrative. To prove to myself undeniably that I was not small. That I was capable of acts of enormous consequence. That my quiet strength was more powerful than his loud arrogance. I clicked the mouse. I initiated the transfer. The numbers were large, the kind of numbers that make you pause, double-check, triple-check. But my hand was steady. My heart, which had hammered so often with anxiety and pain, was calm. This wasn't scary. It felt right. Like closing a complicated set of books, everything finally adding up to zero. The notification on the screen confirmed the transfer. It was done. A large chunk of my carefully built security, sent into the digital ether, directed towards erasing a debt that wasn't mine, held by people who, according to my husband, didn't respect me. A wave of something washed over me. It wasn't triumph yet. It was anticipation. And a profound sense of quiet power. The money was gone from my account, but it hadn't vanished. It had been transformed into something else entirely. Something that would land like a bomb in the quiet landscape of his assumptions. The next few days were surreal. Life continued. He went to work, came home, talked about his day. I went to work, came home, listened. The secret sat between us, a massive, invisible thing. I watched him, knowing something he didn't, something that would redefine his understanding of our life, his family, and my place in it. The quiet satisfaction was immense. Every dismissive word he uttered now felt hollow, pathetic, underscored by the reality he couldn't see. The bank handled everything efficiently. A few days later, I received confirmation. The mortgage was paid in full. A simple email, a PDF statement attached. Paid in full. The words seemed to shimmer on the screen. Now came the planning for the reveal. It couldn't be a casual conversation. It needed to be cinematic. It needed to land with maximum impact. And it needed to happen when his family was present. They needed to see it. Not just the act, but his reaction. His parents were planning a small family gathering the following weekend. A casual Sunday lunch.
Perfect.
The stage was set. The drive there felt long. He was talking about a client, oblivious. I nodded along, my hands tight on the steering wheel. My heart was starting to beat faster now, a nervous flutter mixed with exhilarating anticipation. I had the confirmation email on my phone, the PDF attached, the simple, undeniable proof.
We arrived.
The house looked the same, welcoming, but with that familiar, subtle distance I always felt. His siblings were there, their spouses, a few cousins. The usual polite hubbub. His parents greeted us warmly. His mother asked about work, and before I could answer, he jumped in with a comment about me being the detail person, useful for sorting things out but not for the big stuff, a small jab, meant to place me firmly in my box. I just smiled. Not a pasted-on smile this time, but a genuine one. He had no idea how much big stuff I had been sorting out. Lunch was served. Conversation flowed. Work, kids, vacation plans. The topic of his parents' house came up. Something about needing a new roof, and his father sighing about the expense, adding, "It's always something with this old place." And with the mortgage. "Well, we manage," his mother nodded, a hint of worry on her face. He launched into a mini lecture about financial planning, offering unsolicited advice to his parents, positioning himself as the expert, the successful son who understood these things. He talked about interest rates, about leveraging assets. He was in his element, commanding the room, the picture of the successful man discussing important matters. I listened, my gaze fixed on him, then on his parents. They looked tired, burdened by the mention of the mortgage, even as they listened patiently to their son's advice. And then I knew this was the moment. I cleared my throat, a small sound that seemed amplified in the sudden lull between his sentences. Everyone turned to look at me, slightly surprised that I was about to speak. He looked annoyed, impatient, clearly expecting me to make some small, irrelevant comment. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, maybe a little louder than usual.
All eyes were on me now.
He was frowning. His parents looked curious. "Speaking of the mortgage." I paused, letting the words hang there. The air in the room seemed to still. "I've been doing some financial planning myself lately." I glanced at him.
His frown deepened.
He was about to interrupt. I could see it. "And I took the liberty of looking into your mortgage, Mr. and Mrs. husband's last name." I addressed his parents directly, deliberately bypassing him. Their eyes widened slightly. He scoffed a low, dismissive sound. "Oh, for God's sake," he muttered. "What could you possibly know about their mortgage?" It was quiet, meant only for me, but loud enough to carry in the sudden silence. I ignored him. I kept my gaze fixed on his parents. "It seemed like a burden," I continued, my voice soft now, but carrying immense weight. "Something that was preventing you from fully enjoying your retirement, from doing the things you wanted to do." His mother's hand went to her chest. His father leaned forward, his eyes narrowed, trying to understand. "So," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. A smile that held the weight of months of planning, years of quiet accumulation, and the stinging memory of every dismissive word. I took care of it. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. His parents stared at me, uncomprehending. His siblings looked bewildered. And his face was a mask of disbelief, then dawning horror. "What are you talking about?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. "You took care of what?" I held up my phone. The screen was bright, displaying the PDF. "I paid it off," I said simply. "Your mortgage. Paid in full. As of 3 days ago." I pushed the phone across the table towards his parents. His father reached for it, his hand trembling slightly. His mother gasped a small, choked sound. His father opened the PDF. He scanned a document, his eyes moving quickly over the figures, the bank name, the date. His hand tightened on the phone. His face was ashen. His mother looked from the phone to me, her eyes welling up. "Paid in full," she whispered. Yes, I confirmed. Completely gone. You own the house. Free and clear. His father looked up from the phone, his eyes meeting mine. There was shock there, confusion, and something else, a profound sense of gratitude. He cleared his throat, but no words came out. His mother started to cry, quiet sobs at first, then more openly. She reached across the table, taking my hand in both of hers. "Oh, my dear," she said, her voice thick with emotion.
Why? How?
"It's just numbers," I said, shrugging slightly, trying to appear casual, though my heart was pounding. "Something I'm good with. I had savings. More than enough." All eyes were on me. His siblings started murmuring, looking from me to him, confusion rippling through the room. And him. I finally looked directly at him. His face was a picture. Red splotches bloomed on his cheeks. His eyes were wide, fixed on me with an expression I had never seen before. Not contempt, not boredom, not even anger. It was pure, unadulterated shock. And something deeper. Humiliation. He stood up abruptly, scraping his chair back. The sound was harsh, disruptive. You did what?" His voice was strained, disbelieving. "Are you insane? You used our money?" "It wasn't our money," I said, my voice calm and steady. I looked around the table, meeting the eyes of his family. "It was my money, my savings. Accumulated over years." I paused, letting that sink in. The quiet, invisible wealth he never saw. I turned back to him. His face was contorted with rage now, the shock giving way to fury. "You didn't tell me? You did this without telling me? How dare you?" "Why would I tell you?" I asked, my voice dropping slightly, for his ears only, but still audible in the stunned silence of the room. "You think I only count paper clips? You think I don't understand the big picture? You think no one respects me?" I let the last words hang in the air, the echo of his own cruelty thrown back at him. His eyes flickered, the color draining from his face as he realized the weight of what he had said and what I had done in response. His parents were still holding my hand, his mother weeping softly, his father staring at me with something akin to awe. His siblings were watching the scene unfold, their previous conversations forgotten. The focus of the family was suddenly, irrevocably on me. The quiet one. The one who counted paper clips. The one no one respected. This is unbelievable," his father said, his voice husky with emotion. We don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied. It was just a problem I could solve. Like balancing a ledger, I looked at him again, the man who had dismissed me, belittled me, rendered me invisible. His face was a mask of impotent rage and dawning understanding. He saw it now. The scale of my small-scale operation. The depth of the power he had overlooked. He stammered something, incoherent words about betrayal, about disrespect. The irony was thick enough to choke on. His mother pulled me into a hug, surprising everyone, most of all me. She held me tightly, sobbing into my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. You've lifted such a weight." His father came around the table and stood beside me, putting a hand on my shoulder. You are a remarkable woman," he said, his voice heavy with sincerity. "We will never forget this." The respect I had quietly craved, the respect he said I didn't have, was suddenly palpable in the room. Not from him, never from him, but from the very people he had perhaps hoped would validate his own perceived superiority. He stood there, isolated, watching his family embrace the woman he had just publicly diminished moments before. His face was thunderous, but he was powerless. His carefully constructed world, where he was the center, the successful one, the one who understood wealth and respect, had just been dismantled by the quiet woman he thought only counted paper clips. He couldn't stand it. He turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind him, a final, pathetic punctuation mark on his defeat. The room remained silent for a moment, the echo of the slam hanging in the air. Then, his mother pulled back, still tearful, but smiling through it. His father squeezed my shoulder. His siblings started asking questions, their voices filled with genuine astonishment and, yes, respect. The dynamic had shifted, irrevocably. The aftermath was both a whirlwind and a strange stillness. After he left, his family gathered around me. There were more tears, more expressions of shock and gratitude. They couldn't understand how I had done it, how I had accumulated that much, how I had kept it a secret. I explained, simply, about my job, my savings habits, my research. It felt surreal, discussing my quiet competence so openly, receiving genuine admiration for the very traits he had mocked. They talked about the mortgage, the worry it had caused them for years, the dreams it had postponed. My act wasn't just paying off a debt. It was giving them freedom, peace of mind. Their gratitude was overwhelming, humbling. They asked about him, about our marriage. I was honest, perhaps for the first time, about the emotional distance, the dismissiveness, the feeling of being invisible. They listened, their faces etched with concern and perhaps a dawning understanding of the man they thought they knew. His father looked particularly troubled. His mother held my hand. Her earlier polite distance vanished, replaced by genuine warmth and empathy. I didn't go home with him that night. His parents insisted I stay. The quiet of their guest room felt like a sanctuary. I lay awake, not with anxiety this time, but with the quiet hum of resolution. It was over. The marriage, undeniably. The public humiliation he had sought to inflict had boomeranged back at him, amplified 100-fold. He had shown me what he truly thought of me, and in return, I had shown him the true measure of my strength. There was no going back. The disrespect had been a poison I could no longer tolerate. The act of paying off the mortgage wasn't just revenge. It was a declaration of independence. It was me stepping out of his shadow, not just in his eyes, but in the eyes of the people he valued and, most importantly, in my own eyes. We separated shortly after. It was messy, of course. He was furious, feeling betrayed, robbed of his perceived control and status. He tried to turn it around, to make me seem like the villain. But his family had seen. They had seen his reaction, his rage not at the act of generosity towards his parents, but at the revelation of my independent financial power and the respect I had gained from his family. His attempt to control the narrative failed. His parents remained incredibly supportive. They were caught in the middle, of course, between their son and the woman who had changed their lives, but they didn't waver in their gratitude or their newfound respect for me. They saw his true colors when he prioritized his injured ego over their relief and happiness. The divorce was difficult, but I navigated it with the same quiet competence I had used to pay off the mortgage. The numbers were clear. My finances were separate, solid. He had underestimated my small-scale abilities once again. I left the marriage with my financial security intact and, more importantly, with my dignity restored. Life after him was quieter, but also fuller. The absence of constant low-level disrespect was like a weight being lifted. I focused on my career, finding new challenges, speaking up in meetings, taking on projects that pushed me outside my comfort zone. I discovered that when you stop trying to earn respect from someone who refuses to give it, you free up an enormous amount of energy to build respect for yourself. His family stayed in touch. It was tentative at first, but it grew. They were genuinely grateful. They saw me now, not as just the quiet wife, but as an individual, someone capable of extraordinary things. The respect in their eyes, the warmth in their voices, was genuine. It was validation, not just of the financial act, but of me as a person. The house, their house, which I had freed from debt, became a symbol, not of my generosity, but of my strength, my hidden capability. It stood there, solid and secure, a monument to the fact that quiet competence can be more powerful than loud ambition. He had told me no one respected me. He was wrong. In his world, perhaps, built on fragile ego and superficial status, my quiet nature was perceived as a lack of substance. But in the real world, the world of actions, of impact, of quiet strength and unwavering resolve, respect is earned not by volume, but by integrity and capability. I had earned it, not by seeking his approval, but by ignoring his judgment and proving him wrong in a way he could never forget. The numbers had added up, beautifully, poetically, to zero debt and infinite self-worth. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever felt underestimated or invisible, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.